Would you risk your own life to fix the mistakes in someone else's? How far is too far? The stage lights were unkind, harsh, and unforgiving, casting long shadows that swallowed the edges of the sweat-streaked face of Elliot. His fingers trembled as he pressed a note on the grand piano in the center of the small auditorium. The sound wavered, a fragile thread unraveling in a cold, sterile space packed with spectators wearing indifferent glances. The murmur of the crowd was a low tide of whispers and suppressed chuckles, washing over him like a relentless storm sweeping away any fragile hopes. Outside, rain pounded the black pavement of the mist-soaked town, streams pouring from fire escapes and gutters. Their constant patter, a monotonous soundtrack, contrasted sharply with the silence that gripped the room after his last faltering chord. Elliot's eyes, glassy, searching, darted to the judge's table where a stern woman with cold eyes scribbled notes. The judge's expression twisted into a sneer, an unmistakable signal, a verdict before it was even spoken aloud. "Next," barked the judge, dismissing him with the finality of a slammed door and the subtle scorn of a world that didn't make room for silence or struggle. A ripple of laughter broke from the back rows, sharp and brief, like a sudden cold breeze cutting through the damp air. Elliot's shoulders drooped under the weight of quiet humiliation. His worn jeans scratched uncomfortable against the bench, his hoodie hanging loosely over a frame, fighting the symptoms of exhaustion and deep-rooted self-doubt. The aura of failure clung to him like the clammy mist outside, chilling and inescapable. He stood slowly, finally looking beyond the stark stage lights to the gray morning where wet cobblestones caught reflections fractured like his shattered confidence. His reflection flickered in a puddle, not his own face but a fragmentation of many, as if the world was already telling him he had no real identity, no grounded self to call his own. He stumbled down the steps, the echo of his footsteps mingling with the drip of rain from the eaves above, a symphony of solitude. The faint glow of dawn wrestled with the mist, softening the jagged edges of the town's silhouette, hinting at possibilities hidden beneath layers of failure and silence. The bench in the park sat empty and waiting beneath the skeletal branches. Nearby loomed an old, weathered piano, its keys dulled and worn by time, dormant as if guarding untold secrets in the chill dawn. Elliot's fingers lingered against the railing as he passed the park, the songbird insignia on his jacket briefly catching a sliver of light, a small symbol of resilience amid the lost and the lonely. A distant thunder rolled, a low promise in the shifting weather, tying the rhythm of the falling rain to the beating of his uncertain heart. The moment held, a delicate balance between despair and something like a call, a secret rhythm echoing softly from the old piano's silent keys. His breath caught in his throat, the world holding its breath, waiting. His shadow stretched long across the misty sidewalk, a solitary figure marked by vulnerability but moving, nonetheless, toward whatever awaited in the silence beyond. The night pressed down on Elliot like a heavy shroud as he stumbled away from the cold fluorescent lights of the audition hall, his footsteps swallowed by the relentless rain that drummed against empty streets. Each step sent ripples racing through puddles that mirrored an endless sky of mist and shadow, a sky as fractured and uncertain as the thoughts swirling in his glassy eyes. His breath, shallow and uneven, blurred with the mist, a pale ghost fading into the damp air. He moved with numb detachment, a worn coat wrapped tightly around his slight frame, hiding the tremors that no warmth could still. The faces from the hall haunted him, disapproving, dismissive gazes that etched themselves deep beneath his skin like cold scars. Their judgment clung to him, relentless as the rain that showed no mercy in this forsaken town. The alleyways swallowed him whole, the flickering street lamps casting distorted halos that danced mockingly on slick cobblestones. Silence pressed against his ears, deafening, until it fractured beneath the slow drip of water from rusted gutters. That fragile sound was his only companion, a metronome marking time lost in self-recrimination. In the depths of despair, the heavy weight of inadequacy settled like a stone in his chest, dragging him toward a void where dreams withered unnoticed. Elliot's fingers curled into clenched fists at his sides, fighting the urge to collapse beneath the suffocating wave of shame. His hoodie, once a comforting shield, now felt like a shroud constricting the fragile flicker of hope stubbornly clinging beneath his fractured soul. Without direction, he wandered, until the twisted iron gates of the deserted park rose before him, a sanctuary of silence and shadows. The air here was colder, sharper, as if the night itself breathed in slow, deliberate sighs amongst skeletal trees swaying under the weight of mist and memory. His eyes caught the faint gleam of black keys beneath a brittle shelter, an ancient piano sitting abandoned on cracked stone. The instrument was draped in the quiet dignity of forgotten stories, its faded wood bearing the grime of forgotten dawns and rain-soaked eves. Here, amid the rain's ceaseless chorus and the whispering gloom, Elliot hesitated, a murmur of something unnameable stirring in the quiet. The piano's surface echoed the chill, yet beneath its cracked frame lay a promise, the possibility of something beyond despair. He approached slowly, breath steadying despite the storm within. His fingers washed over the cool keys with hesitant reverence, each touch a tremulous step into an unknown cadence. In the rain's embrace and the soft dawn's glow, a fragile connection flickered between man and instrument, a tether poised between worlds. Above him, the sky fractured into pale ribbons of mist and light, reflections in the puddles at his feet shifting with every languid ripple, faces uncounted, identities whispered on fractured surfaces. The rain softened, a curtain lifting, as if the night itself watched, waiting for the first note yet to sound. And in that suspended silence, Elliot felt the seed of awakening take root, a quiet pulse beneath the ache, a soft echo of the songbird's call buried deep within. His shadow stretched long across the damp earth, poised between darkness and the fragile promise of dawn, as he lifted a tentative hand toward the keys, ready to step beyond the silence. The dawn was cold, fingers of pale light slipping silently through the mist that clung to the town's deserted park. Elliot's breath hung in small clouds, fragile as the hope fluttering quietly within him. At the edge of the forested path, the old piano waited, weathered and drenched from countless rains, black keys glistening with raindrops that reflected the muted morning light like tiny worlds suspended in time. His fingers, tentative at first, brushed the keys with a cautious reverence, each touch a tentative step into an unknown future. The cacophony of doubt, regret, and failure that had plagued him seemed to still, silenced by the soft resonance of sound whispered from the aged instrument. The notes carried like mist, folding over the dripping leaves and wet stone, weaving around the lonely branches and settling into the fabric of the dawn. In the fleeting moments of quiet music, Elliot felt a fissure in the suffocating gloom that had wrapped itself tightly around his heart. The piano was no longer a mere object of decay but a gateway, a pulse between worlds, an echo chamber that trembled with hidden possibilities. As his eyes fell upon the reflections in the puddles surrounding the piano, he caught fleeting glimpses, shards of faces not entirely his, wavering identities dancing just beneath the surface. A shiver ran through him, a ripple of both fear and strange exhilaration. The rain's gentle patter mingled with the soft, fragile notes, a duet of cleansing and awakening. His normally glassy eyes brightened, tracing the faces shifting and melting within the puddles, masks of unknown lives, stories untold yet palpably near. A breath caught in his chest, the chill piercing deeper than the cold air. His fingers moved faster now, guided by a strange instinct, keys responding beneath gentle strokes that sang with a new urgency. The piano's melody gripped the morning, drawing him further into the realm where reality blurred and blurred. Then, suddenly, the world tilted. The mist deepened, swirling into a vortex that spun visions, flashes of other lives, other selves, and for a fleeting heartbeat, Elliot was ripped away from himself. The laughter, pain, and stark realities of another existence seeped into him, replacing his own but leaving the faintest residue on his weary soul. The rain ceased, the first golden rays piercing through the clouds, illuminating his face as a single tear traced a glistening path down his cheek, catching the light like a solitary beacon. In that shimmering moment, Elliot glimpsed a fragile truth, a beginning buried beneath layers of silence and fear. The piano whispered promises of change, The puddles reflected the multitude of lives he could yet touch, and the morning breathed new life into his faltering spirit. With a quiet determination settling over him like a warming cloak, he lifted his hands once more. This time, the music was different, not just a song of loss but a quiet anthem of rebirth and unseen journeys. His shadow stretched long behind him on the damp earth, merging with the fading fog, poised to cross the threshold from despair to discovery. And the songbird's call, once faint and faltering, rose strong and sure within, heralding the spark that would soon ignite the unfolding story. Morning light filtered through thick mist, slicing in ethereal beams over the silent park where Elliot stood before the ancient piano. His fingers hovered hesitantly above the worn keys, the remnants of rain dripping slow, steady rhythms all around him. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading cedar, a mixture that wrapped him in a fragile cocoon between worlds. The piano's wood was worn, scarred by years of neglect, its black and white keys stained with stories never told. Elliot, clad in his faded jeans and threadbare hoodie, felt the rough grain beneath his fingers and pressed down tentatively, coaxing out a tentative melody that quivered in the stillness. The notes floated into the mist, fragile and uncertain, weaving between the skeletal branches of nearby trees. A shiver ran through him, not from the early chill but from the unexpected warmth spilling from the music. His heart fluttered awkwardly with a suppressed hope, a whispered promise that this forgotten instrument might be the key to something greater, something beyond his small, shadowed world. Then, as his fingers traced a hesitant melody, the world around him began to tilt and shift, a soft dissonance in the fabric of reality. The mist thickened, colors bleeding and blending, until he was no longer merely in the park but somewhere else. A scene flickering with unfamiliar faces, laughter, footsteps, and a sense of belonging he had not felt in years. The moments lived unfolded around him like memories, not his own warmth of a family kitchen, a child's delighted shout, the soft touch of a hand in his own. Initial confusion blossomed into a fragile intrigue, a dawning realization that the piano was a gateway, a link to lives beyond his own desolation. Yet, with each borrowed breath, the kernel of doubt gnawed within. Could he truly inhabit these fragments of others' existences? Was this escape, or an invitation to something more? The rain returned in soft cadence, tapping against the piano's frame, rhythmic as a heartbeat, and Elliot's gaze found the reflections in the puddles beneath the ancient instrument. Faces shifted and shimmered, his own features merging and dissolving into countless others, a mosaic of identity and possibility. He whispered, voice breaking the weighted silence, "Who am I if not these moments?" As the melody swelled, tentative yet growing, the veil between worlds thinned, its fabric taut and trembling. The piano keys called once more, promising a journey not just of notes but of self, of discovery cloaked in the lives of others. And with a breath full of both fear and fragile hope, Elliot allowed his fingers to dance anew, stepping across the delicate threshold between despair and awakening. But beneath the fragile light of dawn, a question lingered, unspoken and profound. How far would one go to save a life that is not one's own? The mist thickened again, the park swallowed in silence, and the promise of the piano's song echoed into the unfolding unknown. The soft morning light struggled through the dense mist that cloaked the small town, casting a pale, fragile glow on the rain-soaked streets. Elliot's fingers danced anxiously over the piano keys, each note trembling with the weight of a borrowed life. The melodies, once mere attempts at connection, now bore the heavy burden of choices not his own, a struggle between reverence and recklessness. His eyes, once glassy and distant, flickered with a flicker of clarity and fear as the vivid fragments of another man's world unfolded around him. The moments he inhabited felt real and urgent, a child's laughter in a sunlit room, a whispered argument by candlelight, a hand grasped in desperation. But with each step deeper into this borrowed existence, the line between his own fractured self and the lives he touched became perilously thin. He faltered, pressing harder on a key, and the notes cracked, frayed like the edges of a fragile dream. The consequences of his intrusion rippled silently, unnoticed by the world but searing through the tapestry of a life not his own. Through water-streaked windows, Elliot saw shadows, moving whispers of strangers whose trust he had yet to earn, whose paths he could irrevocably reshape. A sharp pang of guilt stabbed at his chest, the exhilaration of escape twisted into the ache of responsibility. To live another's hardships was to carry their wounds, too. He clenched his jaw, struggling against the dissonance of his truth and the borrowed self's reality. Each decision he made carried weight, fragmenting lives in imperfect, unpredictable ways. A sudden knock echoed from a nearby door in the shadowed corridor of this shared existence. A woman's voice, soft but wary, called his name, a name that was no longer his. Elliot's heart thundered. His knowledge was incomplete, his presence intrusive. "You can't just take over," she whispered, tears blurring the threshold between accusation and plea. "This is my life." The rawness in her voice struck him, unraveling layers of his fragile belief that he could simply slip through lives without consequence. His own reflection shimmered in a puddle beneath his feet, fragmented, uncertain, a mosaic of faces, each asking silently who he truly was. As the rain intensified, the cascading water mirrored the flood of doubt crashing within him. The piano's somber chords melded with the storm's rhythm, a lament and a warning entwined. Elliot withdrew into the shadows of the borrowed life, grappling with a rising tide of moral conflict. Was he a healer or an invader? Could he balance the fragile ledger of impact and intention? The world he touched held fragility beneath a veneer of routine. His mistakes bore silent consequences, threading uncertainty and fear like unseen storm clouds. The night deepened, and with it, a piercing revelation unfurled a secret within the life he had entered, intertwined with his own hidden past. The reflections in the puddles revealed not just other faces, but concealed truths whispering a profound connection, a revelation that unraveled and reknit the knots of identity and belonging. His breath hitched as the piano's final note lingered, a haunting echo of a choice made, a path irrevocably changed. Outside, the rain eased to a fragile drizzle. Elliot's form stood still beneath the mist-shrouded branches, poised at the edge of revelation. The journey had deepened, fraught with peril, yet alive with the fragile, trembling hope of transformation. And within the shifting reflections of dawn, the question rested, unspoken and profound. Who was he, truly, when lives and selves intertwined? The morning fog thickened, an enveloping silence filled the space, and the songbird's faint call beckoned onward toward discovery, toward change. The heavy mist clung stubbornly to the cobblestone paths of the deserted park, distorting the pale light of dawn into soft, gray swaths that seemed to swallow sounds whole. Elliot's shoulders curled inward, small and fragile beneath his threadbare hoodie, as if pressing himself into the silence could shield him from the piercing weight of what he was beginning to understand. The piano's old, worn keys lay before him like a nexus of possibilities and dangers, the gateway he'd dared to cross, opening into lives not his own. His fingers lingered on the black and white keys, hesitant now, trembling under the burden of secrets they had unlocked. The music he played no longer felt like simple notes but threads weaving through fragile human stories he once viewed as distant but now pulsating with unbearable intimacy. A discordant chord shattered the silence, a faltering echo of his internal fracture. The reflections in the puddles at his feet shimmered, fragmented faces shifting grotesquely distorted portraits of intertwined fates. They bore into him with silent accusations, urging a reckoning he had tried to evade. Each mirrored visage was an unfamiliar self, yet allied in their fear and longing, a mosaic of identity splintered by choice and chance. A phrase whispered through the drops of rain. "Who are you, truly?" The question cut deeper than any melody he had played, unraveling around his hollow doubts and the fragile esteem he clung to. The taste of betrayal washed over him suddenly, not from others beyond the park's veiled bounds, but from within. The lives he had entered were connected, their secrets interlaced beyond his initial comprehension. His trespass had consequences far beyond his days of loneliness. Acting within these stolen moments shaped ripples that surged through others' realities, sometimes breaking more than healing. An image flashed sharply, someone close to him shaking a finger in accusation, not just for his intrusion but for the carelessness born of desperation and flawed hope. The cold dawn light failed to warm his skin as he wrestled with the immensity of responsibility descending upon him. He whispered, voice cracked under the weight of revelation, "I thought I sought only to find myself, but I have become a fragment in many lives lost and found, shaping destinies intertwined with my own failures." His eyes, wide with stunned clarity, shifted to the piano keys. They gleamed not as an escape but as a crossroads. Each note now bore the gravity of choice. His own fractured reflection lurked between the twilight and the lingering shadows, beckoning him to confront not only the borrowed lives but the truth stitched into his own. The campus of memories coalesced in the mist, laughter tinged with regret, warmth folded under layers of loss, and the haunting knowledge that disentangling himself might shatter more than he dared imagine. As rain began to fall anew, gentle and insistent, washing away the fleeting colors of dawn, Elliot made a choice written in the tightening of his jaw and the steadying breath that followed. He would no longer flee the tangled weave of borrowed selves nor the shadowed corners of his own lost identity. The piano's ancient voice called, a siren song wrapped in promise and peril. He pressed a key, and the first pure note rang out, a beacon across the mist, frail but unfaltering. The moment held suspended in suspended breath, poised on the edge of unraveling and rebirth. And as the last tendrils of mist curled like silent witnesses around the lonely figure at the piano, Elliot stepped fully into the unknown, his journey irrevocably altered by the painful grace of truth. The rain fell steadily, a relentless drizzle that blurred the outlines of the world, muting colors and swallowing sound beneath a gray, unyielding sky. Elliot's breath came in shallow, erratic bursts, the cold seeping into his lungs, mirroring the frost that had settled deep within his soul. The deserted park, once a sanctuary of possibility and fragile awakening, felt vast and unforgiving, an expanse of empty benches and skeletal trees dripping with moisture, their branches trembling like fragile bones in the wind. He stood at the edge of the forgotten piano, its black keys dulled by years of neglect, droplets tracing paths across its worn surface. His hands, which once danced with tentative hope, now hung limply at his sides, as if the weight of countless lives bore down on his very being. The notes he had played, moments he had lived through bodies not his own, blurred together into a cacophony of loss and confusion, drowning out the faint echo of his own fractured identity. A gust swept through the park, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. Elliot's gaze fell to a puddle at his feet, the surface disturbed by rain, fracturing his reflection into shards, each shard a different face, a different self that he no longer fully recognized. The songbird insignia on his worn hoodie caught a fleeting glint of light, a weak pulse of defiance amid the overwhelming darkness. Words spilled from his lips, barely audible, more a whisper than a plea. Who am I now? The question hung hollow and unanswered in the heavy air, swallowed by the relentless patter of rain. The world around him seemed to close in, the fog thickening, the shadows deepening, the silence pressing down like a suffocating shroud. The piano echoed a faint, dissonant note as if mourning, resonating with Elliot's unraveling spirit. Memories of faces blended with sensations that were not his own. A lost love's laughter fading into a cold void, a child's cry drowned in silence, moments of joy tainted by unseen regrets. The lives he had touched, borrowed, and inhabited seeped into his consciousness, causing fractures in the fragile boundaries between their stories and his battered self. His legs gave way beneath him, and he sank onto the damp earth, the chill biting through his jeans, the cold seeping deep as the shattering of his sense of self spiraled into despair. His fingers traced the muddy ground, searching for roots, for meaning buried beneath the relentless storm of doubt. All around, the rain blurred the world into an endless gray, the mist wrapping him in isolation. The cacophony of borrowed lives became a suffocating silence that threatened to engulf him entirely. Elliot's eyes, glassy and distant, reflected not the man he once was, but a ghost adrift in a storm of loss. The songbird's faint whisper symbol of his fragile inner voice faltered, nearly extinguished beneath the crushing weight of his fading hope. And in the desolate hush of the rain-soaked park, amidst broken reflections and shattered dreams, Elliot slipped toward a darkness so profound it threatened to erase him altogether. The piano's keys, untouched and waiting, seemed to pulse beneath the relentless rain, silent witnesses to the unraveling the final breath before the storm's fury consumed all. The early morning was a wash of cold gray light, rain pattering in soft, endless tears over the empty park. Elliot sat alone on the damp bench beneath the skeletal outlines of trees, his form hunched and shrinking against the creeping chill. Around him, the world was a blur of muted shadows, the mist thickening like a shroud that smothered any colors of hope. His breath came shallow and uneven, each exhalation a ghost fading into the cold air. Fingers stained with dirt and neglect trembled as they traced the hem of his threadbare hoodie, the fabric worn and faded like the edges of his resolve. His green eyes, glassy and distant, stared unseeing at the puddle before his feet, where the rippling water fractured the reflection into 1,000 shards of fractured selves. Inside the puddle, faces melded and dissolved his own, and others he had lived, breathed, and struggled through. Each one whispered fragments of lives not wholly his own, calling out from the depths of identity fractured and displaced. The reflection fractured and shifted in the rain, a quiet metaphor of a soul splintered beyond recognition. Around him, the park was desolate, the mist pressing in as if trying to smother the last flickers of light. Broken branches scraped against the worn piano nearby, its keys silent and weathered, mirroring the empty ache that echoed through his chest. The distant drip of water from a loose gutter reverberated like a somber heartbeat, low, relentless, and unyielding. Elliot's lips parted, releasing a breath so soft it was almost swallowed by the steady rain. "Who am I?" The words were raw, a whispered plea lost in the vast emptiness. His own voice sounded hollow, as if spoken from far away, seeped through layers of despair and uncertainty. The silence that answered was deep, an abyss that seemed to spread into the spaces between raindrops. He curled inward further, a small figure against the vastness of an indifferent world, the weight of countless borrowed lives now heavy beyond bearing. The piano's silent presence loomed nearby, a mute witness to his unraveling. His eyes traced the black and white keys, the gateway, the promise of escape, and the source of his torment. Yet they offered no solace, only the harsh reminder of a path carved by fragile hope now dulled by endless suffering. The heavy rain blurred the boundaries of the world, muffling all sound, until only the whispered tapping of the piano's weathered notes resounded faintly within the recesses of his Minda, haunting melody of loss and dissipation. In this unbearable stillness, Elliot felt the last thread tethering him to himself begin to fray, the threadbare cloak of his identity slipping away into the storm. The rain intensified, washing across frozen earth and fractured soul, and by the edge of that silent pool, Elliot's figure crumpled, swallowed by a shadow deeper than night. The world held its breath, the songbird's fragile call now a distant echo fading into the endless gray. And within that overwhelming silence, the piano waited, its keys untouched, its song momentarily stilled, poised on the verge of awakening once more, beyond the shattered world where a lost soul lingered in twilight. A fragile dawn seeped slowly through the lace of mist that cloaked the rain-washed park, painting the world in muted hues of gray and pale amber. Elliot sat curled near the time-worn piano, his body a fragile silhouette against the ghostly light. His breath fogged in front of him, slow, ragged, a rhythm tethering him to the fracturing edges of his self. The worn wood of the piano, cold beneath his trembling fingers, seemed to pulse faintly with echoes of lives touched and tales borne on its forgotten keys. Yet in the stillness, it offered no answers, only the haunting memory of connection and the heavy silence of loss. His eyes, clouded with exhaustion and doubt, drifted downward to the puddles pooling at his feet, their surfaces rippling softly with the gentle rain. In the fractured reflections, Facious Own and others danced fluid and elusive, a kaleidoscope of shifting identities that mirrored the turbulence within. A single drop of rain traced a path down his cheek, catching the faint glow of early light and shimmering like a fragile crystal. It was a small beacon against the gathering shadows of despair, a quiet reminder that beneath the weight of sorrow and confusion lay the glimmer of something yet unbroken. The world seemed to hold its breath. All sound retreated except the delicate murmur of raindrops on old wood and stone. In that suspended moment, Elliot's fingers brushed lightly across the worn kisa whisper of melody, delicate and unsteady but unmistakably alive. Within the wavering notes, a thread of clarity unfurled, binding the disparate echoes of borrowed lives into a fragile tapestry whose design hinted at unity amidst disarray. The songbird, once a faint emblem stitched upon his heart, now stirred with renewed resonance, its silent song resounding softly in the interstices of shadow and light. Elliot's lips parted briefly, voice a hoarse, reverent murmur, "Not alone." The words hung in the damp Ira fragile declaration, fragile yet fierce. The mist began to lift slowly, unveiling the outlines of the park renewed by rain and mystery, and with it, a subtle shift within Elliot's spirit. The path before him remained shrouded, uncertain and shadowed, but it was a path none the less promising, a journey not merely through borrowed lives but toward a deeper understanding of self, of empathy, and of purpose. With measured breath and tentative resolve, Elliot rose, his silhouette elongated by the dawn's pale light. The piano remained, ancient and steadfast, a gateway and a witness to his fragile awakening. And as the first bird's song broke the silence, threading a delicate melody across the quiet world, Elliot stepped into the unfolding dia-faded figure reborn in the soft glow of possibility. The early dawn filtered through the cracked window frames of the old, abandoned building, casting faint gold and pink streaks onto the dust-laden air. Elliot stood silently at the edge of the room, the faint glow illuminating the dust motes that drifted lazily with the breeze. The heavy weight of despair still clung to him, scars from his failures. The echoes of applause lost in a society obsessed with success lingered like shadows in his mind. On the cracked wooden floor, the battered piano sat dormant, its keys dulled but still faintly gleaming with the promise of music, of connection, of healing. Elliot's unkempt hair fell into his eyes as he hesitated, trembling fingers hovering over the keys, unsure if his touch would summon the courage he desperately needed. The air was thick with silence at first, an almost sacred pause before a tentative note escaped from his fingertips. It was a fragile sound, hesitant and raw, like a whisper faltering in the vast emptiness of his soul. Yet within that whisper was the first flicker of something subtle, hope. His eyes, clouded and glassy, shimmered with a mix of vulnerability and realization. Slowly, as if awakening from a coma of despair, he pressed deeper, letting his fingers stumble over the worn keys. A faint melody bloomed, hesitant but growing, an echo of resilience buried beneath layers of doubt. The room seemed to breathe with him, the dust motes swirling in the weak, diffuse sunlight that filtered in. The muted colors of decay and shadow softened, giving way, however slightly, to a shimmer of warmth. The melody unfurled in gentle waves, weaving a fragile tapestry of sound that touched distant corners of his fractured self. He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the warmth of this new beginning. The melody carried a faint echo of innocence, of a voice long silenced, an unspoken plea for redemption and a silent vow to rebuild what was broken. For a moment, the weight of failure seemed to lift just enough, unveiling a sliver of possibility. The music, though tentative, hinted at an awakening, the slow, delicate first step of a journey toward acceptance and healing. A soft breeze found its way through the broken panes, stirring the dust and whispering promises of renewal. The room, once shadowed and forlorn, bathed in a muted teal glow as the fragile notes lingered, trembling in the silence, poised on the precipice of change. Elliot's gaze fell to the old piano, the worn keys beneath his trembling fingers, the gateway to countless lives he yearned to understand. As he played, a subtle glow seemed to emanate from within him, casting a gentle, golden light that flickered faintly across his features, hinting at a future that remained yet to be written. And so, in the quiet dawn, with a single, hesitant note, Elliot took the first fragile step forward, knowing that the true journey, the arduous path of self-worth, had only just begun. Morning unfurled slowly, its pale light creeping over the ruined cityscape, casting long shadows that mingled with the emerging hues of dawn. Elliot stood with hesitant resolve beside the old, weathered piano, the air thick with the smell of rain and neglected echoes of yesterday's failures. His hand hovered trembling over the keys, the worn wood sparking with faint, dormant energy, a silent call to the awakening within. His eyes, cloudy yet sharp with a flicker of newfound purpose, fixed on the muted horizon beyond the destruction. Every nerve in his body vibrated with an unspoken vow, an awakening of inner strength born from the depths of despair and the realization that redemption was a path only he could forge. Slowly, he pressed the first key, soft and tentative at first, like a whisper stolen from the shadows. Then, a delicate melody unfurled, hesitant but unmistakably brave, the faint pulse of hope amid the cold silence. The notes, fragile yet persistent, wove through the stillness, piercing the gloom with threads of resilience. The melody persisted, expanding in gentle waves, as if coaxing the broken pieces of his spirit to realign. The gloom thickened with shadows yet contrasted the warm glow of his awakening, an internal dawn that refused dismissal. He closed his eyes, feeling the vibrations course through him, connecting past failures with fragile potential. In that moment, the city's ruins shimmered subtly, a distant reflection of his own internal landscape, darkness touched by the faintest shimmer of light. The silent piano, weathered but noble, echoed a quiet revolution, a testament to the silent strength of hope reborn. His fingers moved with purpose, no longer trembling in fear but dancing in emergent confidence, each note a step toward redefining himself. The melody grew richer, the music's tone lifting, resonating into the rising dawn, a song of empathy and healing threading through the desolation. The light strengthened, spilling over broken rooftops and shattered streets, illuminating the cracks and scars in the world outside and within. The music, unceasing in its gentle ascent, became a symbol of unspoken forgiveness, an act of quiet rebellion against despair. As he played, a wave of awe washed over Hyman, emotional clarity blooming amidst the chaos. This was no longer just a song but a declaration. He could still be a creator, a healer, a keeper of stories waiting to unfold. The melody lingered, a fragile yet unbreakable thread, a testament to the power of hope in the depths of despair. With a deep breath and a renewed sense of purpose, Elliot's hands pressed toward the final note, a caress, a promise. Dawn broke fully now, casting the first true rays of sunlight upon his figure and the silent piano. The scene held moment frozen in time, a snapshot of resilience and renewal, a silent witness to the beginning of a journey from darkness to dawn, from despair to hope. The sun rose higher, flooding the once shadowed landscape with a brilliance that seemed to burn away the lingering darkness. Elliot's figure stood firm amidst the ruins, bathed in a glow that shimmered with new purpose. His shoulders, once burdened by doubt, now carried the weight of understanding and acknowledgement that salvation was forged not in perfection but in redemption. In the quiet aftermath of his rebirth, the old piano near him gleamed anew, bathed in the soft, golden light filtering through the trembling branches. Its weathered exterior seemed to pulse with the silent promise of a journey that had only just begun. The melody that had once hesitated now flowed freely, each note a testament to resiliency, a gentle song that wove through the dawn, echoing the rebirth of a soul. Elliot reached out, fingers trembling with a reverent strength, and pressed the keys with deliberate purpose. The music unfolded, not just as a collection of notes but as a living declaration, an aria of hope crafted from pain, tears, and small, daring victories. The gentle crescendo carried an unspoken message. He was no longer lost, no longer broken, but awakening. His eyes, reflecting the luminous horizon, no longer appeared glassy with despair but shone with a quiet fire. The storm within had quelled, replaced by a calm grounded in truth and acceptance. Beneath the expanding light, the world around him shimmered shattered remnants renewed by the dawn's gentle grace. The iconic symbol of the songbird on his chest caught the light, a silent emblem of his internal transformation. Once a fragile whisper of vulnerability, it now radiated confidence and unspoken pledge to carry hope into the uncharted days ahead. The melody hovered in the air, delicate yet unyielding, a bridge connecting the past to the future. Elliot's gaze lifted, steady and resolute, toward the vast, whispering horizon. The silhouette of the landscape stretched into endless possibility, a canvas awaiting his next brush of purpose. The notes soared, embracing the air with a strength rooted in humility and courage, weaving hope from the fabric of despair. He took a slow breath, the cool air filling his lungs with renewed clarity. The storm had passed, leaving a landscape scarred but somehow sacred, a testament to resilience and the unbreakable human spirit. The pianist, ready a master of both melody and mercy, was poised on the cusp of the journey ahead, his heart a quiet beacon, calm, unshaken, and free. In that luminous dawn, Elliot sat in silent awe, the music quiet yet infinite, a testament to the power of redemption and the beauty that emerges when one dares to rewrite their story from the ashes. The world stood still, poised in a moment of perfect harmony, a silent celebration of resurrection and hope. Dawn crept softly over the city, painting the misted streets in hues of pale gold and silvery blue. Silence stretched vast and tender, wrapping around the quiet town like a woven cloak. Elliot sat alone at the corner of his modest apartment, his hands gently resting on the worn keys of the old, familiar piano. The air was thick with a quiet reverence, a moment suspended in time where shadows of the past and hopes for the future intertwined. He looked at the instrument with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the chaos and loss he had endured. The rain from the previous night had washed away the grit and grime, leaving behind a fragile serenity. Light flickered through the window, softly illuminating dust motes that seemed to dance in harmonious, silent celebration of resilience. His eyes, once dulled with despair, now shimmered with a softened glow and acceptance that had slowly begun to reshape his internal landscape. The scars of failure, rejection, and self-doubt still lingered beneath the surface, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they served as quiet memories, testaments to the journey, to the struggle for truth and belonging. Elliot's fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant but no longer trembling with fear. With a breath as gentle as the dawn, he pressed down softly, letting the familiar melodies flow through hymn notes that carried whispers of forgiveness and hope, echoing in the quiet room. The music rippled outward, delicate yet unwavering, a balm for wounds once thought unhealable. In that moment, a subtle shift occurred, an inner awakening settled like a dawn's first light spilling across a darkened sky. It wasn't a dramatic upheaval, but a gentle realization. He was enough, just as he was. The recognition dawned like a quiet sunrise, illuminating the truth of his worth beyond fame or applause. He played on, each note a tender affirmation of the connectedness of all journeys, his own intertwined with countless others, each seeking meaning, identity, and love. The music became a silent prayer, reaching into the depths of his soul, composing a symphony of acceptance. In the silence that followed, the room filled with an understated beauty and intimate acknowledgement that healing was ongoing, that each step forward was a quiet act of courage. Elliot looked at the sunlight touching the piano's surface, a gentle reminder that even amid darkness, light persists unstoppable, unbreakable. He closed his eyes for a moment, a soft smile touching his lips, as if embracing a silent old friend, the melody of life, imperfect yet profoundly real. The camera drew back, capturing the peaceful scene, an ordinary moment transformed into an extraordinary testament to resilience and hope, setting the stage for the next chapter, beyond the shadows. The dawn light cast a soft, golden hue across the quiet town, bathing the streets in a gentle glow that seemed to breathe new life into the tired cracks of the pavement and the weathered facades. Elliot sat at the old piano in his modest room, the keys under his fingers no longer trembling with fear but moving with a quiet, steady purpose. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and the faint aroma of old wood, a comforting reminder of the journey he'd traversed. His eyes, once cloudy with despair and doubt, now shimmered with an unspoken peace. The music flowing from the instrument was slow, deliberately a reflection of a soul that had been battered, yet gently mended. Every note was a tender act of forgiveness, a silent acknowledgement that he was finally at peace with his past, with himself. He looked out the window, where the first rays of dawn peeked over the misty horizon, illuminating the world with a delicate promise. The reflections in the puddles on the street shimmered like fractured faces, transformed now into symbols of resilience and hope. These faces, once ghostly and fractured, faced the sunrise with quiet serenity. Memory softly drew near, not as a shadow but as a gentle whispered echo of struggles endured, lessons learned, connections made. The intertwined stories of his life and the lives he had glimpsed through the borrowed worlds became threads woven into his own story, a tapestry of shared human experience. His hands moved with a newfound grace, each keystroke a testament to acceptance and the acknowledgement that his worth had always been present hidden beneath layers of self-doubt but never lost. In this moment, the silent melody poured out as a love letter to himself, an ode to the interconnectedness of every journey that had shaped him. The faintest smile touched his lips as he played, etching a tune that resonated with stars and stories, untold, an allegory of hope and renewal whispered in the language of music. The world outside stirred softly, wrapped in the tender embrace of morning's first light, an eternal reminder that even in the deepest darkness, a quiet dawn awaits. He paused, allowing the last note to linger in the space with a gentle finality. The room seemed to breathe alongside him, a vessel of transformation and peace. The shadows receded as the sunlight grew stronger, illuminating the path forward, an unspoken promise of continued growth, compassion, and understanding. In that luminous stillness, Elliot's heart, heavy with the weight of past failures and fears, finally let go. He was finally free to embrace his journey, honor his stories, and play boldly into the unfolding future. The camera slowly pulled back, leaving him bathed in a golden glow, a silhouette of resilience and hope against the awakening world, an ode to the interconnectedness of all human journeys. The first rays of dawn stretched softly across the horizon, casting a gentle amber glow over the quiet town. Shadows retreated from the streets that had soaked through with rain, now shimmering as if renewed by a quiet, almost sacred mercy. In his modest apartment, Elliot sat slouched at the old piano, the instrument's weathered surface bathed in warm light, an invitation to peace. His fingers, once trembling with doubt, moved with a measured calm, each note carefully placid, an unspoken prayer of forgiveness, of understanding, of acceptance. The melody was slow and tender, weaving through the silence like a gentle breath, a testament to the interconnectedness he'd come to embrace. Outside, the world was waking anew, raindrops still clinging to the cracked window panes, reflecting tiny prisms of sunlight. The puddles on the street mirrored the soft pastel sky above, fractured faces shimmering in liquid glass, each a symbol of the shifting journey, the masks that he had shed and the myriad lives intertwined in the dance of existence. With each keystroke, Elliot felt the weight of the past lift, dissolving into the morning air. The melody rose gently, a quiet affirmation that even in the deepest darkness, light persists, resilient and unwavering. His heart, once cloaked in despair, now beat with a peaceful strength, a harmony born from the acceptance of everything he had endured and all that he was beginning to understand. He closed his eyes briefly, allowing the music to wash over him, anchoring him in the moment. The song was a river flowing through the intertwined stories, his own, and countless others, each one reaching out through his notes to where their lives met in silent communion. This was the culmination of his journey, a silent ode to the universality of human experience. The camera slowly pulled back, framing Elliot in the glow of dawn, a silhouette of resilience amid the tranquil landscape. The house, the streets, the distant hillside bathed in this quiet radiance became symbols of reconciliation and hope, a testament that peace is not merely the absence of chaos but the acceptance of one's place within the endless interconnectedness of life. In that moment of quiet harmony, Eliot let the final note linger, touching the edges of eternity and unspoken promise that even in the silence, there is a melody, waiting to be heard. As the screen gently faded to light, the scene sealed with a single still image, a puddle reflecting a perfect, undisturbed sky, a mirror of inner peace, gently awaiting its next chapter. What song would your life play? Share your thoughts below.